This is a University of Otago podcast.
Hello, it's nice to be here again. I'd just like to start by simply introducing the fellows. On your left, Robbie Ellis, the Mozart Fellow, James Norcliffe, the Creative New Zealand College of Education, University of Otago Children's Writer-in-Residence. Did I say that right? Is that all right? Yeah, good. I think that's the name. James. On which way am I going now? On your right, is that right? You're right? Yeah, that's right. Neale, the Burns Fellow, and Nick Austin, the Hodgkins Fellow. There we go. Now, the fellowships have been in existence for 50 years, and I'd just like to read you a little line from Landfall magazine in March 1959, when Charles Brash said, he argued that part of a university's proper business is to act as nurse to the arts, or more exactly, to the imagination, as it expresses itself in the arts and sciences. Imagination may flourish anywhere, but it should flourish as a matter of course in a university, for it is only through imaginative thinking that society grows materially and intellectually. So, and indeed the Burns 50th anniversary publication was called Nurse to the Imagination for that very reason. I'd simply like to invite the fellows one by one to talk a little bit about themselves, what they're working on, how they do what they do, and maybe I'd just like to ask them to start with to explain to us about their creative process, the idea that that as a mere mortal, what do they do when they start working? What's the process of the empty canvas or the empty piece of canvas, manuscript paper, a writing block, call it what you will, computer, whatever it is. And is there a sense of fear or worry, or does it just sort of come naturally, or is it even more ephemeral than that? So where should we go? Should we start at your end? Are you happy?
I'm happy enough.
Good, okay. Yes. Robbie.
Okay, I am the Mozart Fellow. The fellowship was named because, of course, Mozart has a deep and abiding connection to the region of Otago. Although, no, actually, time to expand on that theory. There's a musicologist called Robin McConey, a New Zealander who's an expert on the works of Stockhausen, but he has this theory, I don't quite hold to it, but that Papageno and Papagena in Mozart's The Magic Flute were influenced by drawings of Maori chiefs wearing feathered cloaks. I like to think it's true. I don't really think it is, but that's possibly Mozart's connection. Anyway. Right. I most recently lived in Wellington. I worked for Radio New Zealand Concert for 4 years, and I'm originally from Auckland. It's my first time living in the South Island. I've always been fascinated with Dunedin as a city, and I was always hoping I'd have the opportunity to live down here. Having known many people who have been transient population here, and, usually as students, actually. I compose dots on paper music. That's why I was given this fellowship. I do plenty else, but that's sort of the reason why I was given it. And I suppose that's what we remember Mozart for now, for his dots on paper music that ended up getting published and performed again and again and again and again and again. But Mozart did a few other things, so if I'll be so bold as to compare myself to him, what we do in our daily lives, he performed. I like getting out and performing. He was a promoter. I run gigs called Song Sale. Next one is in 8 days' time. I've got flyers if anybody needs them. And he was also an improviser, and that's one thing that I try to get involved with pretty much anywhere I live, actually. Improv theatre. Some of you may know it as theatre sports, some of you may know it from the TV show Whose Line Is It Anyway? They're two quite narrow bastardizations of the forms, really. And there's a company here called Improsaurus, which does shows every 2 weeks at the Fortune Theatre, which I perform with. But yes, Dots on Paper music. I came down with a big list of promises to outside ensembles. Hey, I've got this, I've got a salary for a year, I'm going to write you a piece, and I'm still fulfilling those obligations. I think I've finished 4 pieces, and some of them have been performed, I think. Yes. So tomorrow I start a piece for Auckland Youth Orchestra, which I think I have about 2 weeks to write. I think it'll come off.
So how do you do that? I mean, you use the expression dots on paper, which means, I guess, you're notating everything as opposed to doing giving the performer any kind of sort of ad lib or interpretative stuff. So with the composition that you're writing for the Auckland Youth Orchestra starting tomorrow, you've got an empty screen at the moment, or do you have some motives, or is there anything in your head at the moment about what you're going to do tomorrow?
Yes, yeah. Well, because I tend to work with a queue of pieces to write. I'm thinking about who's going to be playing them and the situation, what the situation calls for, and what ideas I might want to get across. And so this has been a really valuable thing, that there are all these cues, and I'm thinking, what am I going to write for these people many, many months in advance before I start writing the first notes. In this particular case, I was inspired by reading Music by Oliver Sacks, a psychologist, a British-American psychologist. And he was talking about Schumann's last years in the mental asylum outside of Bonn, and sort of basing this piece on a chorale that Schumann wrote in his final years. So it's going to be a bit of a darker piece than usual. The story is that he was possibly for months on end just haunted by this one note, which is an A, just barreling really loudly. It was sometimes ebb, sometimes flow, but it would always be there, and sometimes just be unbearable in his head. That's the basic thought of that piece, and I'd been cogitating that idea since I read it. I borrowed that book off my next door neighbour and read it in February, March. I thought this will make a pretty good idea. And 4 months down the road, tomorrow I'll start committing to writing something, and the first note will be an A. That's about all I can tell you.
What instrument will be playing that A yet? It could be a lot.
Well, it could...
Unison A for everybody.
Well, of course, the A is also the note that orchestra's tuned to. Yes. So, yeah, it could be an oboe. Yeah. I'm not sure yet. Thinking clarinet, actually, because they can rise from nothing and you barely know it's there.
So that's part of the gift that you've been given, is the time to actually get excited and do these sort of things, not quite knowing where you're going with them.
It's definitely an opportunity. I think the most valuable thing I've got from this fellowship so far, well, yes, the time to work on it, and the resources and the lack of pressure on income, but also I've managed to discover how fast I can actually write. When I've had a day job or when I've been a student, so many other things get in the way, and while I allow plenty of other things to get in the way of me composing, it's been very valuable to know, yes, I can actually get this done in 3 weeks. I can get this done. So hopefully down the line, when I've got a full roster of commissions, one after the other, backed up 4 years in advance, and people have asked me, if anybody wants to do that 20 years down the line, do feel free to give me a call. I'll know, yes, exactly how fast I can get something done.
Good.
Yeah.
James Norcliffe.
In my real world, instead of this magic world that I've been enjoying for the last four for nearly 5 months, I work at Lincoln University, a job teaching, which is very creative in itself, but it does take away all the time for your ordinary, the sort of creative writing that you want to do. So when I found that I had the I can't say the whole thing, but I say the Children's Writers Fellowship. I was utterly delighted because I did have a couple of projects that I've been thinking about and pondering about, but only in an inchoate way, just managed to sketch a few ideas, and this gave me the opportunity to work on those. So it was utterly wonderful. I guess the Children's Writers Fellowship is not quite as long as the others. I only have about half the time that these people have, so the time for me has been much more, I won't say pressured, but it's been much more intense. So I've really been able to work hard at the projects I had. So much so, in fact, that I think possibly now I've gained three children's books, and I've lost 1.5 stones. I'll keep the 1.5 stones, and I think writers are always a wee bit wary, a wee bit cheery about talking about works in progress and what they're doing, because it could be the kiss of death, you sort of. But I'm going to hazard fortune, and I'll talk about what they are. The first project I had was to write a book within a book. So I suppose I could argue that in a precious sort of way that I've actually written 4 books, because this book actually is a story about a fantasy writer who comes to visit a family, and the second chapter starts with the actual fantasy book that the writer's writing, and then in interleaving chapters we get the whole book that the fantasy writer has written, and the family he's staying with are relations, and gradually the 2 books sort of start interfering with each other. So it's quite a clever little thing. I quite like plotting. It's one of my great pleasures to make fairly intricate plots out of the story. So I think this is quite okay, but I can't say that it will ever see the light of day. The second project was something I've been thinking about for quite a long time. I wrote a book called The Loblolly Boy, which is a fantasy about an invisible flying boy. It's a gift, I think. I don't quite know where it came from, but it was given to me, and it filled my head for a few weeks and months, and I wrote it down, and it's been quite a lovely story. The first book was basically just half of the final story, and I wrote the second half as well. And it does have a Dunedin connection, because in 2000 I was Emma, and I enjoyed the Burns Fellowship in 2000, and I was staying at Knox College and walking to the university through the gardens, which was, again, another magic year. And I'm quite a tree buff, and I noticed one of the trees I passed was called the loblolly pine. It's a lovely word, loblolly, and I looked it up when I got home and found that among other things, it was the name of some gruel. It's a Scottish word. It's an onomatopoeic word, loblolly, loblolly, loblolly. But further down the list of definitions, it had this term loblolly boy, and I said, I can use that. And so I conceived of my loblolly boy, which is quite a different sort of a loblolly boy to the original. And one or two of the reviewers of the loblolly boy and its successor had pointed out that, asked the question, was there a connection between my loblolly boy and the original loblolly boy? Now, the original loblolly boy had one of the worst jobs in the world. He was a surgeon assistant in the Royal Navy during the 18th century, and then later during the Napoleonic Wars and further on. Usually about 11 or 12 years old, ghastly sort of a job. I don't quite know why the loblolly connection was there. It may have been because this kid would serve gruel to the poor people who were enduring the surgery on those ships, which was probably just not exactly a very sophisticated trepan, more like a sort of a hacksaw. and probably had to clean up, not because of any fears about hygiene, because hygiene wasn't really known about in those days. I suspect to make the surgery less slippery. But they said, well, perhaps there was an loblolly boy, perhaps there was an original loblolly boy that gave rise to my imagined creature. And so this thought had been preying around in my mind, and I have come down here and written the third book, which is probably the first book, because it talks about this original loblolly boy. And I was able to set it in the Spanish Main during the war, the War of Jenkins' Ear, which was a strange fight between the Spanish and the British in about 1740. I was able to bring in a Dunedin connection again in the various battles, because one of the battles in that war was the taking of Portobello, after which Portobello Road in London was named, and I presume there's a connection here with the Portobello in Dunedin Harbour. So I managed to write to that book as well, and I think I'm quite happy with it. I'm courting disaster by talking about it, I know, but there it is. And I finished that, and I have now finished a third book, which I've called The Crate, and set on the West Coast. It's quite a different book. This is a creepy feature, a dark story. It really arose because I was able to imagine a real doozy of a situation about some kids at Moana, and a crate is delivered, a coffin-sized crate. It's very heavy. They get it off the truck that delivers it. They're told not to open it. They open it. There's absolutely nothing inside it. They put the lid back on. Dad comes home. They fess up, and they go to move the crate, and suddenly it's not heavy anymore. And I thought, that's really strange. What is the reason for that? And I couldn't think of one for a long time. So I pondered it, and suddenly it all started to fall into place, and I've written this ghost story here. So that's basically where I've been, and I've had time even to think about another book, number 4, number 5, number 5 and number 6. No, number 4 or number 5, whatever it is. I won't finish that, I don't think, but I'm having a great deal of fun.
So does that mean, in actual fact, that when you start this story, this narrative, you have the idea and you have no idea where it's going to take you?
No.
Is that scary?
No, I mean, I don't. That's not how I operate.
No.
I have to solve the problem really before I start writing.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And that's why this fellowship has been so wonderful for me, because the way I do write is I like to have the whole story in my head, and the rest. And I don't write copious notes or character descriptions or setting descriptions or anything like that, and cross-reference and flow diagrams. I just have to keep the whole story in my head until I can almost see it like a movie, and then I sort of keep rerunning it in my head. And living in Dunedin's lovely because I'm in the Robert Lord Cottage. And it means that it's probably part of the 1.5 stones that have gone. I've walked to the college and walked back and walked into town and walked down the supermarket. And all the time I'm doing that, I'm running this movie in my head and waiting until I get to the computer and do the next little bit. It means I'm quite a danger to traffic, of course, but there it is. It's been lovely.
Wow. Thank you. Emma Neale Burns.
So there are really 2 parts to the question, aren't there? This is a little bit about who I am, and then there's the working process.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
when I'm not in this magical position as well, I work part-time as a freelance editor for various publishing houses around the country, and every alternate year, usually I teach creative writing in the English department, but that's always budget dependent, so I'm never really sure what's going to happen each year. So this year is an incredible gift in that sense. My proposal for the Burns involved writing. I claimed I was going to write a sequence of interrelated poems that were going to be a little bit like a verse novel, I thought. And I had another idea for a novel as well, which was going to look at some fairly dark territory. It was going to look at postnatal psychosis and the aftermath on a family after the mother had experienced this. But very early on in the fellowship, I realised that one of the gifts it does give you is the time to abandon things as well as the time to write. And I realised that I wasn't really prepared to do some of the research and some of the kind of darker thinking that particular novel was going to involve. So I just put that on the back burner. I probably have about 10,000 words, but I'm just going to sort of lock it up and store it away for another time. And the so-called sequence of interrelated poems has morphed as well. It's decided that it wants to be a novel, I think. And that's partly because I realised if I was going to write about a cast of characters, I was going to have to work out many of the things that you need to work out for a novel anyway. What sorts of people they are, why they're in the difficult situation that they're in. So I've been working on narrative and character, and that's actually pushed poetry out of this particular project. And I really don't know whether I'm going to end up re-sculpting poems out of the narrative that I define, or what's going to happen with it, which is exciting but is also frustrating, because it's that kind of scary first draft stage where you really don't know what you're working with. And it can lead to some performance anxiety when you have a fellowship like this, actually. And I've also found that with the freedom that I have this year, it means that I'm able to kind of catch ideas on the fly more, which I haven't really been able to do for the last couple of years. So disparate poems have been bubbling up in a way that I hadn't really expected, things that aren't at all related to the two projects that I thought that I was going to work on. So that's been a wonderful, unexpected gift as well. One of the other things that the fellowship has done is to make me think more, I suppose, more conscientiously about my practice and what sort of work I write. And that's partly because you are in an academic context and there are people who are fascinated by writing and literature around you all the time, and they're sparking off new ideas. New visiting speakers are coming into the department all the time, which opens up possibilities for paths that you might go down as an author. So it's a really stimulating environment to be in. One of the other things is that the colleagues are also very discreet, so they know not to knock on the door and sort of scare away the muse. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, that you have a social milieu to move in when you need contact and when you need inspiration, but also you're given privacy. And I guess the other thing that I really enjoy about having this opportunity is that a lot of the things that I normally do as a jobbing writer now feel well paid. So there are things like proofreading a book of poems, which I've been lucky enough to have come out, well, it comes out next week from the University Press. It's called The Truth Garden, and all the work that goes into thinking about things like font or the rearrangement of poems and proofreading the text, that kind of thing, I can actually feel as if I'm being paid for this. Normally I'd have to squeeze into nights or weekends or whatever. And I guess one of the questions was, how do you start with the blank page? What do you do when you see the blank page? And how do you overcome the existential terror, perhaps? So, I often moan about how fragmented my day is because I have young children, and so I have to, my writing is compressed into a shorter time frame than it might be if I were at a different life stage. But actually I think that in some ways that protects me from the terror of the blank page, because it's so exciting when I actually get time on my own with my work, that it's not usually, I don't usually have writer's block for that reason. It's more like playground. It's my turn. So that's kind of an answer.
Amy, you said you had 10,000 words locked away now that you're put to one side. I don't know what 10,000 words is. Is that?
It's not very much.
It's not very much. Is that not very much? 10,000 words.
Short children's novels about 50,000 words, and a long one's about 80,000 words. So an adult novel would probably be 80 to 100, probably. It's about 2.5.
So that 10,000 that you've locked away, that's not wasted, is it? Or is it?
Probably not.
No.
There might be things in there that I can cannibalise for other projects if I feel that this is never going to go anywhere. And I think that, it's like digging your way out of your rut in a way, that you have to write some of that material to clear your way to do other things. So I guess it's never wasted in that sense, and it's kind of keeping you limber as well. So yeah, it might never see publication, but that's just part of the game. Yeah.
Nick Hodgson.
Well, I'm Nick, and I go to the studio that the university's given me to work in for the year. I go there most days. So I'm a studio-based artist, and I say this because, for a while, I think a lot of the, recently I've looked around peers of mine and I've realised that, there's a real strand of contemporary practice is this kind of project-based art, where one is invited to an event or an occasion to respond to a particular environment or occasion or something. I don't really excel in that kind of situation, so I've definitely tried to kind of establish a practice where I'm working in the studio. And as Emma said before, one of the things that this fellowship allows is one to abandon things that you're working on, and that environment, this studio, being in a studio and having this fellowship is certainly feel like I can do that. I haven't this year. I made a pitch to the university or to the committee when I was applying for the fellowship. That I made a pitch and I said I would do these, a couple of series of works, and fairly early on I kind of realised I'm not an artist who works in series so much as collections, and so each thing that I do has its sort of own logic, or has its own kind of reason, and each thing or each piece, which is be a painting or a sculpture, has its own reason and its own kind of logic. So I make exhibitions which are collections of things rather than a series of things. And maybe it's the same for everybody here. Is I started the year with a few prior projects, things to do on my schedule. So really, till quite recently, I feel like I've just sort of been taking care of those. And it's only really recently I feel like I've been able to kind of think about what I want to do with the fellowship, and I'm in quite a luxurious position, I think, where the schedule's pretty clear until I do a show at the Hodgkins Library in February. And so I just kind of started to think about what I'm going to do for that. So kind of thinking about concept or a structure for the show as being a book or a notebook or a sketchbook, where it's kind of like a bound, the book being a way of binding a collection of ideas, And so, yeah, this is what I started to do. I would like to be an artist that made work from their dreams. I guess it's a strand of like the visionary arts where you have these dreams and then you just kind of wake up and you can kind of just transpose them. Recently I had a dream about an artwork and I hadn't made it, but I'd seen it and I saw it. I was really blown away by it, and I'll tell you about it. It was a painting on it's a canvas, maybe about this big, and here, I think human hair would have been pasted onto the canvas and painted onto the hair was a bald woman, and just from her shoulders, she was a bald woman, and she had this look of surprise on her face, and she was looking at a thing that was out of the frame, and the work was called, she had a look of fright, and the work was called Reading the Newspaper. Maybe I'll make a picture of this, but I think that maybe the story is the word.
It sounds to me as if it might be a work that you actually are going to create. It's been put in front of you for you to execute.
I think I make things more difficult than that.
So your genre, your forte is on canvas, on paper, sculpting, or are you a bit of everything? And maybe this fellowship gives you that luxury to do everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been working for 10 years or so. Worked as a sculptor when I was at university. I trained in sculpture. Soon after that, I moved into painting because I liked the just like sitting down. I like sitting down at a table more than hunting around and trolling factories and stuff. So I did this. I think I'm an arranger of materials, be it a collage or assemblage. Certainly this year I'm doing some more sculptural things. But as I say, there are arrangements of objects, found objects, as well as paintings. Two-dimensional drawings. So but certainly this is. I think it's an expensive moment.
I'd like to ask you all, for whom are you creating, and do you have your audience in mind during the whole process, or is the audience sort of almost superfluous? I remember one year sitting here listening to one of the fellows saying that he didn't actually care about anybody else. He didn't mind if his work never saw, or in his case heard, the light of day. That's not what he did it for. So I'd like to ask you each whether you do this for yourself, or whether you do actually appreciate or respect or have in mind an audience. Go.
Dear everybody assembled, I hate you all. I always want to expand the typical audience of whatever I do to a bit wider than before. Now, if you take the new music audience, because all right, you have what? Okay, take the Southern Sinfonia concert last night, which was something Dvorak, Sibelius, Dvorak, and Elgar. All dead white guys, all well and truly part of the repertoire. And Dvorak is, I don't know, Dvorak violin concerto is perceived difficult, but it's certainly played a lot more than, say, the Ross Harris violin concerto, which is an absolutely gorgeous piece of work that's never been played down here, for instance, and we hope that it is at some stage. But yes, you have that classical music audience, and then you have a sort of subset of that, which is the new music audience, and people who aren't, the horses who aren't scared. We take that phrase. I want to make my work accessible to not just that classical music audience, but generally artistically interested people. And I'm not intimately familiar with any of the works of any of the fellows on this table. I don't know everything about them, but I'd like to think that they'd be writing for people like me who are interested in one art form and would like to get to know another. I work a lot in the world of theatre and comedy as well, and sometimes convincing those people to come to classical concerts, or convincing classical music people to come to theatre, improv, that sort of thing. It's difficult, but it's worthwhile trying to get people from one to the other. That's what I would like my audience to be.
Yeah. So if you've got take aside the fact that you've got lots of commissions or promises that you've made to people to write for them, do you write for fun for yourself? And if so, is it just for yourself?
No, not just for myself. The whole process has to be fun. Well, not always fun, but worthwhile and engaging for everybody involved. It's got to engage me. It's got to engage the performers who perform it. It's got to engage the management of the performing group, the orchestra, or whoever decides to put it on.
Yeah.
It's got to engage the audience who pays money to come and see it.
Okay. James, I guess, do you ever write just for the hell of it?
All the time, I think. It's a very interesting question. As an elderly person writing for young children, I do wear three writing hats because I write poetry as well, and I'm an editor of a lot of young people's writing, particularly these days. But I guess when I started in the 90s writing for young people, I was writing as, the A.A. Milne thing for my own kids who were of an age at the time. And of course, I basically wanted to write for them so that they would love and admire me. And as they grew older and left home and one of them was almost going to become a father himself soon, I kept writing for children, but I think when I'm honest, I'm writing for the kid that I would have been. I'm writing the sort of books I would have liked to have read when I was that age. And of course, that has language implications. It has all sorts of other implications because I'm not of that generation anymore. I've got to the point where I don't think it matters. With language, I don't take prisoners. I respect the young people that read my work, but I also presume that if they come across an unusual or a long word, that they can find out the meaning for it. In other words, I don't dumb down. I would never think of doing that. And I think people that do that are doing kids a disservice. I was going to say something else, and it was quite profound, but I've sort of lost it. Yeah, but that's what I do. And because it's still a form of play, I think that's what I like doing. Writing for kids allows me to be a kid long past my prime, and I'm still basically playing. And I pick up what Robbie said. It's not necessarily having fun, but it's having a great deal of self-satisfying creation, and that is, I guess, fun.
Emma, do you have your audience always in mind?
I do, but I do think it's an interesting question, because I suppose another way of coming at that is, would you carry on writing if the publishing industry as we knew it collapsed, or if there was no more possible income stream for what you do? And I think it would probably change what I wrote, but I probably would still write as a way of processing experience, and it's a way of kind of actually working out what you think about the world and about various situations. So my answer might be yes and no, actually. That I think I would carry on writing even if there were no reader, but in the current state of things, I am always thinking of the audience. So I have I have a critical voice in my head all the time, and depending on which genre I'm writing in, it might take on various different faces or kind of archetypal figures in my head. With poetry in particular, I have one very formative peer who was writing around the same time that I first started, and whose style is extremely different to mine, but I have him as a kind of bullshit detector in my head. We still write very different things, but I often wonder, what would he think of this particular poem, as a way of kind of trying to excavate any excess sentimentality that there might be in it. So there's always an interplay between my sense of audience or critic and what I'm trying to work on myself. And I just think, if you're a professional writer, then you need to be aware of audience. Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
If I could chip in with what and Emma reminded me. I mean, what I do as a children's writer, and to a lesser extent, I guess, with the poetry. And I don't quite know how Robbie and Nick, but my writing is very much mediated by the publisher. I can't just write whatever I want and hope that that's going to be out there and given to kids. It's going to go through a commissioning editor, then that's going to go to the publishing company, and they're going to get their editors and readers onto it, and they are very much thinking of the audience, and because it's their livelihood.
Does that process create any sense of sort of vulnerability, or sense that somebody is taking your work and manipulating it in ways which you didn't intend? Do you have any say, or what does that make you feel like?
I don't think I have never had the experience of the editing process completely reshaping what I've done, but I just love editors. I mean, I worship them because their job is to make what I do better, and they invariably do.
Is that your experience too? That the editor is helpful rather than abusing your work?
It is. I've been really lucky. I think that in every case, the editor's role has been to make the best of what they think you're capable of. That's very well expressed. But they're your advocate. They're on your side. And I suppose the flip side to that answer is that my day job is usually that I am an editor, and I really love that role because it's like you're part of the creative process without actually having to come up with the original thought, which is actually the really hard work. And that it becomes a dialogue, and you're still working with language and structure and character and all those things, which is sort of my. That's the air I breathe. So,
in the interest of disclosure, I should point out that Emma has been the editor of one of my books, and I didn't say I loved editors in the sense of sucking up to Emma.
It's a funny little difference between how authors are seen and how composers are seen, because I mean the title composer has just this far more historically weighty element about it than author. I mean, definitely not to diminish what you do, but when you say composer, you immediately think Bach or Beethoven, and I'm presenting myself in that world, and our text, the text I produce is often sort of regarded as a bit inviolable and inviolate by performers who want, we've got to obey exactly the letter of what he's put, and often I'd just rather them tell me, well, no, what if we changed it around to this? It'd work a lot better. And I try to give these performers freedom, but often the trouble that the very, very best performers, the best trained ones, often have all this invention trained out of them by the university music school system. And I kind of just want to slap them and say, come on, give me something of yourself in here. Mm-hmm. And there's a piece for, the biggest piece I've written this year is for organ, drum kit and orchestra. And it is getting played by the Auckland Philharmonia Orchestra next year. And this is an example of knowing your performers and knowing the types of people. The APO I grew up in Auckland. It's an orchestra that I've been involved with for years. As a composer, did secondary schools orchestra, played double bass with them, got tutored, and all sorts of things. And I know some of the personalities, and I can give little sections to them, knowing that they'll pull it off and bring something of themselves. But there'll be others in the orchestra who may
just
not
read it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Can I just say something?
Yes.
In response to your question. Firstly, I met with a lecturer at the university recently for lunch, and she was telling me she's working on this book about this a 12th century identity or person, very obscure person working in England in the 12th century. 13th century maybe, and I was just wondering, I kind of asked the question to her, who are you writing this for? And I inferred I'm not sure if she said it so simply, but I inferred from her answer that it was really for herself. There wasn't there was the motivation to write the book or something. It was just intensely personal interest. And I just so that's a really cool function, I think, of the university. I think, as much as being, I guess, a teaching environment, so it's this place that allows freedom for people to kind of pursue these relatively obscure things, but no less important. And the other thing I was going to say is about audience. I kind of do it for myself, I think. Well, I know. But I'm trying to make this work. I'm doing this work at the moment, and with this idea of a person in mind. It's not a particular person, but it's the idea of an artwork that is for a person. And I want it to be about this moment of when someone gives you a present and you open the present up, you unwrap the present, and you don't know what to make of it.
What I always wanted.
So I'm trying to make this work that's about this kind of really awkward moment.
What I always wanted.
But I think it's actually quite maybe universal.
It needs to be a performance art piece. You have the gift giver who's smiling expectantly for your reaction.
Yes.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Perpetual awkward smile.
Frozen.
Just got one more question before I'd like to then open it to the floor to ask questions of the fellows, and that is, it's a bit glib, this question. When is a work finished? When do you know that work is complete? When do you put your brush down? When do you turn the computer off? When do you...
At the deadline.
Oh.
Well, it's not quite that simple. There are always stages in these processes. So I've got to... I reach certain stages. I always like when I've written the last note. Now, there's a lot of work to be done beyond there, but when I've written to the end, I need to go back, I need to revise, I need to typeset, layout, create parts, send them off, the performers will rehearse them, I'll go and I'll change my mind, and then the performers will perform them, and then the audience reaction will be something else, and then, I don't know, the piece will get picked up again 3 years down the line, and then I've decided, I'm not really happy with that bit, I might as well change it, and then, I don't know, it may get recorded at some stage, and the recording will be there, and then 20 years down the line I'll think, oh, they did such a terrible job of that recording, I really need to do it again, I need to find some funding to get it done again. So quick answer, never. And other quick answer, it's nice to reach goals in certain points of the process. So.
I guess when the book is in your hand and you've got another baby there, it's just lovely. But even then, I mean, the whole process towards that point is one of constant brushing, cutting, polishing, and all the typos, all the possible stylistic little ticks you want to get rid of, you know, the repetitions of words and things. You get it perfect, and then the book is there with a lovely cover and everything else, and it's finished. You think, because I know at least one of my books we got to that point and hadn't bothered proofreading properly the table of contents, and there was a ghastly spelling error in the contents. So I guess, unless there's a possibility of another edition, they're really never finished.
Do you know when to put your pen down? Figuratively speaking, of course.
It's different for each project, actually. There was a visiting lecturer / poet performance artist in Dunedin last week who was talking about Robert Frost's constant revision of his work, that he, you can see in manuscript form, you can see a poem altered many times, and then even the selected version, after it's been in one collection, it's been altered on the selected print, the volume, and then in the collected, he's altered it again by hand in the published copy. And I think for some writers, it does go on until they stop.
Ordered it.
But are they just,
Until they die.
is he just dabbling, or is that legitimate?
I don't know if Frost worked well enough. I mean, the different versions to know how significant the alterations were. But there's definitely a temptation to keep tinkering on some works.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Do you know when to put those temptations away?
I guess quite often you do reach a point of exhaustion yourself. You feel that you've gnawed away at the issue and you've kind of resolved the technical problem, or you've resolved the sort of more pressing thematic question in your head. And there might be, you might debate with yourself whether it needs a comma or not, but then when you take it out, put it in 15 times, you kind of think, well, it's, it probably just can't be the way.
Yes, right. It really is tinkering.
Yeah.
Nick?
I think it's when there's a moment of surprise experienced or created within the work.
Just like that. Bang, finished.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's very disciplined. Yeah. I'd like to open it to the floor if anybody would like to speak. And I see Johnny's got a microphone there which he wants people to speak into if they have a question. Here it comes. One moment, please. Hold it to your mouth and it should work.
Thanks, Nicholas. Is it working?
No. No, just hold it again. Do it now.
There's a green light on. Is that working?
Say it again.
Is it working now?
No, it's not. One moment, please. Yes, it is.
I'll send it in Morse. That's it. Thank you all very much. It's, as always, a very entertaining afternoon to hear what the fellows have to say. In some years, there have been collaborative enterprises that have been put together among different disciplines. I haven't heard that yet from the present fellows. Maybe this year ain't going to be one of those years, but maybe it will be, and I'd be interested to hear.
I am currently teaching second year composition, a module there, and I am making the composition students do a workshop to accompany music to one of 3 set poems, and one of the poems is by Neale. So that's a very limited collaboration.
Okay.
You haven't written anything specially for it. I'm also barring you from the workshops to make sure that they're not too nervous.
We had tried to get together to have a more social kind of interaction and see if some sparks could get going, but children's illness and people's schedules, it's been quite hard. In fact, this is the first time that we've met since the welcome for the fellows. So, maybe from today, maybe the ball rolling. Multimedia.
Everything good takes time, yeah. So no, sorry.
This is a question for Nick, but with reference to the other 3 fellows. I guess with writers and composers, it would be entirely possible to have your entire body of work on a hard drive, and intangible results of that in terms of scores or published books are not your responsibility. They're out there being played or belong to the publisher, being read, whatever. But with an artist, you have a body of work, which unless it's has been bought or exhibited or permanently gifted or whatever, is yours to worry about. I just wonder whether your body of work becomes kind of a burden after a while.
Under your bed.
Yeah, it hangs around. But it's, just with anything, or I was going to say like a creative product, but doesn't sound quite right, but it's like once you finish a work, it's sort of like not yours anymore, and it'll go off into the world. Sometimes I'll sell work, and so I get some money for it, which is really good, but I always worry about it. So I always worry about where that thing's going to go and the life of that thing. Recently, I've been in the stacks at this gallery on the picture racks, and I'm doing myself and Saskia Leek, we're doing the final part of Fiona Connor's project exhibition, which is downstairs at the gallery. And so the thing that Saskia and I are doing is we're selecting in a way we're making a new selection. We're making a selection of work from the racks at the gallery to add to the show, which is downstairs. The works are based on social and professional connections of the artists involved. And why am I saying this? It's because we've been in the picture racks and there's all this work there that is kind of like forgotten. And it's, to say something is bad, I don't think it's really quite true, but it reminds you that work often has its meaning only lasts for quite a short time, and I don't know if that answers your question at all, actually.
But it's interesting that you said that when you sell a work, you worry about it. You sometimes worry about it. It's like you've put so much presumably of yourself into it. It's a very personal thing, and then you sell it in a rather mercenary kind of way to somebody else when you're sort of giving something of you away, selling something of yourself away. And that's a bit scary then, or vulnerable.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, browsing through auction catalogues is one of my fears is, seeing my work, some of this work I've totally forgotten about, turning up on an auction catalogue.
is there that sense of ownership that is quite hard to let go in the creative process? I mean, and then particularly when the critics get hold of it and rip it to shreds, or not, as the case may be. Is there a real sense of how dare they? This is mine, and I've now exposed. You leave yourselves wide open. That's just part of the process, is it?
I think as a writer, you just have to have confidence in your work and realise that every time you put something out there, you are taking your clothes off at a picnic, as Bill Manhire put it, and that's just the way of the world. And some people are going to like it, some aren't. Some are going to be powerful people, and some aren't. But to me, the great levelling thing in terms of what Nick was talking about as a writer would be the Regent book sale. And you
are you getting sold for $5 or $2?
Yes, no, I don't even mean that. Just to say all these thousands of books that somebody has written. Every one of those books has been slaved over and worried over and put out there, and then suddenly there's, thousands of them, and you're just contributing to that pile,
Yes, is that Mr. Ellis? I can't remember your
Robbie.
Robbie. No relation to the artist, Robbie.
No. Both Aucklanders.
Yeah. You talked about the absence sometimes in the classical scene of collaboration, improvisation, and how you wish people would put a bit of themselves into it. That was interesting. It's kind of an anathema, I suppose, to the classical world of writing and performing, as you say, that hierarchical thing of the composer and then the performer. In the modern sense, I have noticed, and maybe you have too, we have Dudley Benson here in Dunedin. What a wonderful example of classical music crossing over, but still retaining its integrity. I think the dark lyrics help sometimes. More recently, I don't know, coming from Auckland, are you familiar with people like James Norcliffe?
Oh, Lawrence Arabia, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was astonished. I don't know whether you saw the gig last weekend with his 11-piece orchestra.
Was he down here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. He was down here when I was in Auckland, and I think he was in Auckland when I was down here.
And it's like, it sets such a benchmark. I mean, I listen right across the range to the most lo-fi stuff, but it's sort of spoiled me seeing a performance like that. It really spoiled my ears and my sensibilities, and I think that now that live performance is becoming very much more the arena for artists, musical artists, because of the absence of, because of the digital presence that is denying them physical sales, that performance is becoming extremely important. Do you see yourself collaborating at that level?
I like to think
outside of orchestral performance.
Well, I'd like to think I bring that spirit into the orchestral world anyway, and that I'm capable of taking these disparate genre influences and merging them into one creative vision. That's always how I've seen things. And well, writing for orchestras, you can't always you're sort of often set within a limited instrumental palette. They're probably not going to go and hire electric guitarists for you. Although that said, they are hiring a drum kit player for that organ drum kit. It's called Relish in Immature Bombast, by the way. I think that says what it is on the tin. So that's a feeling there. I've got a kit player at the back playing like funk, rap, metal, some swing, some sort of stuff.
It's okay.
Organ. What type of organ would you be using?
It's the Auckland Town Hall organ, recently refurbished. It's the biggest instrument in the country, recently refurbished by Orgelbau Kleiss of Bonn, Germany, with 5,291 pipes in total. It can compete. That's that spirit I wanted in that, because you basically got three elements here. You've got full symphony orchestra, triple winds, full brass section, a drum kit, and an organ. And all three of them can go hammer and tongs and play at their normal volume. Well, there's so many subtleties of volume, but they can play it at their full volume and work together. Whereas you put a drum kit with an unamplified classical ensemble, it's like, it's sitting like this, and it doesn't actually sound like a drum kit anymore. You need to whack it to really get that sound. I'd like to bring the spirit into it, yeah.
What other venues could we possibly hear you in, other than town hall type venues?
Oh, well, you're at the church.
Yes. Song sale.
Song sale.
Last Monday of every month at the church. Yeah. How this works, all right, it is composition and invention straight off the bat. You can come along to this gig for free, but you can pay $5, which is well below Composers Association of New Zealand recommended rates for commissions, but you can pay $5 to have a songwriter write a song on a theme of your choosing. You can specify the genre if you wish, you can specify the topic, a title or something, we'll just run with it. We go out the back, we write it, we present it that very night. That's a venue that you can hear me. And that what I'd love to do with this actually, and I'm hoping it'll come off, is arrange a string quartet to be at one of these events. And we'll do some arrangements in advance, perform some older material with singer and string quartet, or singer, guitar and string quartet, or something like that. But also get a few of us composers down in Dunedin to compose on the fly. And you might say, all right, I want you to merge Yes We Have No Bananas with Nellie's Hot in Hair, and maybe we'll try and merge those two in a string quartet arrangement. I'd love to make that happen, possibly next month. We need to find cellists about the places. I know heaps of violists and not enough cellists.
Really?
Yeah.
How odd.
Yes.
Anyone else on the floor? No. Yes.
Thank you very much for a very enlightening afternoon. I would like to ask the two writers, in this digital age, most people, I'm sure the composer is the same, sit at computers. Do you ever write just by hand, with a pen and a piece of paper?
Yes. But I do tend to, that's the sort of thing I write probably in the middle of the night when I wake up and I'm hearing a conversation I want to use, and I'll have to get up and do it and I write it. And occasionally when I'm finished walking home from college, I will jot some ideas down on paper. But I don't write a whole thing in longhand and then transcribe it to a computer. I tend to go straight to the computer these days.
Yeah, for first hot drafts, often it is still in pen and paper, and occasionally when things happen, like university the other day deregistered my computer for some reason, so I was forced just to read and write in the old-fashioned way, and it was actually really refreshing, much better for RSI. So I've been trying to build in actual sort of bodily breaks like that, and do some longhand and then transcribe on the computer. Yeah, but definitely for on the fly, it's often easier to notate something quickly that way with the key than.
I guess that as a creator, you don't know, I'm being a bit romantic here, when the muse is going to strike, if the muse strikes. So a pen and paper or something, I guess, is really quite essential. I mean, as a composer, do you do that? And as an artist, do you notate ideas or little sketches and things as you go about your daily lives? Yes. No.
Yeah, I come across the ideas. They'll often, if they're really good ideas, they'll stick in my head and just loop it over and over again.
Okay.
And if they're good enough ideas to write down, I'll still think well of them the following day.
Okay.
But But often I'll just have the gesture in my head, and then by the time, and because I've got this big queue of commissions I told you about, they'll stay in my head. They'll stay in my head and keep recycling, and then quite a lot will get finalised in here before committing to Sibelius, the notation software, and if I'm orchestrating something, it's just sort of filling in the gaps, really, as long as the idea comes across.
I tend to have a notebook, but that's when an idea or an image or just something I've read will generate a poem, not so much for the fiction.
I call myself and I leave a message.
That's a good one.
Is there any more questions from the floor? Yes, there is.
Thank you very much. As always, that was great from everybody. I just wondered what ideas you've got now for getting a bit more exposure for artistic activity now that Channel 7 has been shut down. Which I see as a national program. What sort of ideas you have? I think that Robbie's already heading in the right direction, but anybody else like to?
I'd just like to join whoever's starting the revolution. No, Tom, that is an utter national tragedy, and I think we should all be sorry for that.
That's it. I mean, TVNZ7 didn't really do much broadcasting of music, to be perfectly honest. And one thing that I think has been lost in the last 30 years, because it hasn't been done very much, is how to televise classical music. It's a skill that not many people know, and you've got to have not only a camera director who knows how to read a score but can cue different camera angles, and you've got to have camera people who can tell the difference between a violin and a viola or an oboe and well, no, I mean not every camera person would. No. So that's actually that organ piece that I'm writing. I'm trying to put some pressure on different people to see if we can get that filmed, because that'd be a great exploration. You know, have a camera just down here at the organist's feet so you can see them do da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
But just as a postscript, I heard this morning, probably most of you did too, that Television New Zealand has canned the entire TV7 archive, so it's no longer available anywhere.
Yep.
One of the things that I see as a significant problem for New Zealand society is that the professional classes, we're talking now about Channel 7 and the things that have been lost, that allow the population to be educated sufficiently to be able to maintain a civilised society. So one of the things that I think has caused the biggest problem is that the professional classes have not advocated for and supported a society which is well in balance in terms of wealth and poverty. And they should have been prepared, the accountants, the lawyers and so forth, should have been prepared to put everything on the line to protect what it is that allows them to be professionals and live in such advantage in this society. With that in mind, how do you artists see your role in maintaining a society that is a good place for everybody to live? And what are you prepared to put on the line in order for this society to be maintained as a healthy, functioning society?
It's an enormous question. It's a very good question. I think, and it's actually something that in a sense, having a fellowship has made me question more, because it's the only year that I can have a decent salary myself, while living as an artist. And so there's a relationship there between, how do we value artists in society and what's our role? And I think one of the possible links into Professor Brooking's question is how can we use the internet and how can we use other digital media that might be taking the place of things like TV and Z7 to communicate to communities and to other artists and so on. And I think that it's something that a lot of us are still coming to grips with. How do you how do you manage things like digital media, blogs, Facebook? What are you using to communicate? What are you using them to communicate about? Is it just to raise your professional profile, or is it to disseminate messages about political issues and economic issues that you might be concerned about? And this is a very personal question, but I think a personal response, I suppose. But I think that often this kind of fellowship year does make you question what direction you're going in next, and whether you can sustain this type of lifestyle yourself, and what role does your work have in terms of maybe reaching out to children, educating children, that kind of thing. And the person who visited Dunedin last week, Chris Cheek, who is an avant-garde poet who's had quite an interesting approach to trying to pull together disadvantaged communities through his work. He's started a few ideas ticking away in my head about what sorts of ways I might be able to reach out to school communities in particular. So I think it's a kind of it's a very big question that I don't have a particular post-it note answer to give, but it's definitely the kind of thing that is churning away all the time behind your artistic practice and behind the types of topics you confront in your work as well. Is that an inadequate answer? Or
good one.
Interesting, on the university's website, which I quoted from when we started, with that quote from Charles Brash, the university goes on to say that at the University of Otago, we believe that our writers, artists, composers, musicians and dancers have a vital role to play in the health and well-being of our community, not just the university community or the Dunedin community, but the wider community of New Zealand. We look to them to offer us visions we cannot make ourselves. We rely on their craft to generate the experiences which will challenge us, entertain us, provoke and reassure us and tell us who we are. So that's a sort of potential political driving too. We've got one more question from the floor.
Just wondering whether each person, how old you were when you sort of first thought about what you're doing now? Like, were you inspired as a child to go on to do this sort of thing? And what or who inspired you to be an artist?
Go.
Oh, well, my older brother went to art school, and I thought he was cool, so I so I went to art school, and I got into it. I don't know. I just kind of that's what it was.
Simple.
I couldn't possibly conceive of a life doing something that I didn't really enjoy. And so instead of taking a law degree, I took a music and arts degree, and it seems to have worked out for me pretty well so far. So I'll just keep going.
I think I had a talent for writing quite young. I know I do, because I was a weak, skinny little fella, and it was one way of avoiding bullies to be good at language, and I became a spokesperson at odd times, and I just carried on, I think, and I just love writing. I love the act of creating, and like Robbie, I don't think I could do anything else, although I have to earn a living.
Could you repeat the question? Exactly. What was it? At what age did we start? Or what?
Were you a child? Was it inspiration when you were a child?
It was. I mean, I'm a little bit like Nick in that my family has a literary history anyway. My mother is a writer, and so I was surrounded by her library, and witnessing her, write a first draft, write a second draft, struggle with publication, celebrate publication. So it was part of the air that I breathed. And I suppose we're all born with only a certain skill set perhaps anyway. That was where my strength tended to be. I did at one stage say that I wanted to be a doctor, but my father was a doctor and he discouraged it actively. He said that it ruined your family life. And so the sciences were then sort of closed for me at that point. But I suppose another formative thing was that I had very, very strong teachers all the way through. And from the age of 5, when I was first kind of intrigued by the way long lines and poems had to be typed underneath, when they went over the margin, they had to be at the end of the line to be put under the next line, and taught about things like lineation by a very good teacher in Christchurch at the age of 5. All these things kind of do seem to have a long-lasting influence and build up.
The fellowships that you've got, yours is 6 months, everyone else's is 12 or academic year, is a wonderful thing that the University of Otago is proud to provide. I just wonder what happens at the end of this period for each of you. Where to next?
I'm worried about this. I came to Dunedin for the fellowship from Auckland, and I'm very keen to stick around here. I really like it here. I don't know how I'll stay. How I'll be here. I don't know how I'm going to do it. But,
I'm going to have to start looking for work again, probably in February, trying to pitch for freelance editing, and ponder the question that the person in the audience in the white turtleneck jersey asked about, what is my direction from here, and what's the best way that I can serve the community and my own family and that sort of thing with the skill set that I do have. Because I will never have a full-time writing fellowship again. I shouldn't imagine it's such a rare opportunity.
Well, I'm luckier than most. I'll return to Christchurch in my day job. I hope to keep some of the magic going. Of the things that I've written, of course, will, I hope, percolate through over the next few years, so I'll be continuing to work on those, and that'll be lovely. But in the meantime, the Earthquake Commission and Fletcher's have repaired our house, so I look forward to enjoying life again as much as I can in the poor broken city I come from.
Anybody mind if I stay here another year?
You have to apply for it again.
I have applied.
Oh, okay.
So
there's that secret out. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank Emma, Robbie, Nick and James for coming along and giving us some insights into how they work, and you can actually see that the lot of an artist, whilst it's very exciting, is very sort of insecure and penurious, but hell, they can't help themselves. So it's just wonderful that we have these people to add to the fabric and the colour of our little world that we live in here in Dunedin. And I'd like to thank also the Dunedin Public Art Gallery for hosting us here this afternoon, and also to thank them for the nice cup of tea and what are they called? Cupcakes, see, you already know it. Cupcakes and macaroons. Is that the macaroons? Which are on display. No, sorry. Which are
behind the glass case.
Out in the foyer. So thank you all very much for coming.